Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with Nami. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host tonight. I am the Assistant Executive Director for Nami North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, North Carolina, and I'm glad y'all are here. Thursdays with Nami is our way of building conversations and building community around the topic of mental health. Tonight's guest is an outspoken advocate and retired law enforcement officer. When I read his story, it hit me how easy it is to go through life really not knowing that much about mental health because we don't talk about it in this country until we feel desperate. For over 30 years, Ryan lived with the roller coaster symptoms of bipolar disorder. He thought his high highs and low lows were normal. People called him irresponsible, lazy, unreliable, full of excuses. Many of us who live with mental illness have felt the sting of those words, those labels. In 2018, something changed. He met someone who opened his eyes and helped him get help. We'll be talking with Ryan and hearing his story in just a moment. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guest. Then we'll spend time with an interview of the week, a video of the week, and finally take questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience on Facebook Live and on Zoom. Now we're going to have a quick word from our sponsors. Thursdays with Nami is funded in part by the North Carolina Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Block Grant Fund. We do appreciate their guidance and their support. They are wonderful partners to Nami, North Carolina. Now, without further ado, welcome Ryan.
Wow, thank you for again having me. Sounds like I look forward to it. It's a great platform.
Absolutely. So we always start learning about the background of our guests. We'd like to hear about you. Tell us about yourself in a nutshell.
That's a pretty big nutshell, but I'll keep it small. So I've been in North Carolina since 2011. I grew up in New Jersey with one sibling, my sister, and we lived, I guess, kind of a fairly normal life. Grew up middle class. My mother raised us. I guess that's not the normal part, but my father took off when we were younger. I am currently a divorced father of 3 teenage girls, hence the gray hair. And I've had, as you'll see, kind of the things that I've dealt with. I'm learning how to cope, or still trying to learn how to cope with things. And as I was telling Peggy earlier, I am now coping with the fact that all 3 of my daughters in the last 4 months have left the roost. So my one daughter got accepted to AMDA in Los Angeles. So she is in theater school there. And at 6 o'clock tonight, my other 2 daughters took off for Italy with their mother for at least 3 months. And we'll see how that goes. But so other than that, that's me.
All right. Well, Italy, I can see how that's wonderful news. It's a performing arts school, is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's wonderful news, and also, kind of, they'll be gone for a while.
Yeah. It's great experiences for all them, but I still have that internal dad selfishness.
Well, sure. You're, of course, attached to that. I miss you a bunch. Why don't we start with the basics? What is bipolar disorder and what does it look like in your life?
So I guess when it comes to bipolar disorder, the I guess the medical definition, I'm not going to get too much into that. I'm just going to kind of give it the I guess the bird's eye view. So basically, bipolar is a chemical imbalance in the brain, and it's your moods are elevated instead of being level. which would be the norm. We go very up, and which is called a manic episode, and then we go very down, which is called a depressive episode. And again, where the normal brain chemistry kind of keeps most people here, bipolar, we go here and then we go here, way down and way up. And
Mhm.
it's different for everybody. There's some whose manic episodes are short, could be a week. My manic episodes were anywhere from 6 months to a year sometimes. And the depressive episodes could be the same. Again, my cycles were, my manic episode would be 6 to 8 months. My depressive would probably be about 6 months. But so when you're in a manic episode, your dopamines, everything is so high that you feel very up, elated all the time, very wired, jumpy, constant racing thoughts. I once had a therapist say to me, and she didn't know I was bipolar, but just based on talking to me, I'll never forget this. We're walking out one day, she goes, "Ryan, I don't mean this the wrong way, but I could never live in your head, because of
Oh,
just constant racing."
ouch.
Yeah, and it, I wasn't mad about it. I don't think she said it in a derogatory way, but it was just, it was, and at the time I didn't get it, but 12 years later, when I figured it all out, I was like, okay, she's right. Too bad she couldn't have diagnosed me, but she was right. So it's also, the decreased need for sleep, talking very fast, just everything's very excessive. It leads to a lot of impulsivity, a lot of bad decisions. You feel almost indestructible. I would feel when I'm in a manic episode, I'm like Superman. I can accomplish anything. Nobody can stop me. And then, but then comes the depression, after that comes the depression, and the depression is so brutally low. And, it's, again, it comes like that, and you can't stop it. And it's really just the opposite. And it gets, for me, it got so bad that you couldn't function on a daily basis. And it's hard to get out of bed. So, but
Thank you. And of course, Caitlin was right on the spot. The full episode is on Amazon Prime. That
yeah,
was
I mean,
powerful.
I couldn't say it better myself. I mean, it's what it is. And the scene in the bathroom, the person, Phil, you said, made a comment earlier, Phil's been my best friend since we were in middle school. And, I didn't know I was bipolar until 2018. So which means obviously he didn't know, but, he can definitely attest to that scene in the bathroom. I mean, there's times where, he wouldn't hear from me for a year, 2 years. And, for some reason he stuck with me. I don't know why, but it was very similar to that when I finally told him. He basically said the same thing. It's just like, well, okay, now it all makes sense. So very, very true.
Coming from Susan, I can certainly remember those days. Well, big shout out to Phil. It's wonderful that you have a friend. And I've been involved with NAMI support groups, for a connection group for folks with mental health conditions. And across the board, that's something I hear is, it's so hard to be reliable. It's so hard to maintain friendships because we really need a lot of latitude. And that's hard to accept, especially for people who don't get it.
Yeah. But yep, but like it's, it does feel good when you tell people though.
It's liberating, isn't it? Yeah.
It really is. It really is.
Was there anything else in the clip that you related to?
Oh, I related to all of it. I think the other big part of it was where we can go there. Those low periods are so low, but the high periods are so high that you can make up for the low periods.
Mm,
I in high school, in college, I would go, I would go into exams with an F. Um,
mm,
but when I got manic, you know, I would end up cramming, staying up for 3 nights in a row, and I would get an A on the final, and that was
ah,
just, it was just constant. But it's interesting because when you don't know you're bipolar, when you're in those, what I find is interesting is when you're in the manic state, you can tell, you almost, even though it happens so many times repetitively, you feel that you can control, you can say to yourself, okay, gosh, getting all this work done and doing it on time is great. I'm never going to let that depression happen again. I'm going to just, but it's like in the movie where it just comes on, and no matter how much you promise yourself or think you can stop it, you just can't. So,
right. Uh, I related to that too. And I don't live with bipolar disorder, but that feeling of I can control it this time, I can get ahead of it. I'll just, by sheer force of will, I'll make things be different. Well, they're not.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're not. But maybe we gain other things like empathy. Um, when did you first experience the signs and symptoms of bipolar disorder? Tell us about that.
So again, probably, I, probably, school. I think that was probably my first sign. But keep in mind when I'm saying this, I didn't know that I was bipolar. So all of this is looking back and having that realization, going, okay, well, what I know now, I can remember that in 8th grade or ninth. But school would probably be the biggest one, because that was where I would, just be so far behind in schoolwork, not want to go to school, but then be able to just kick it out, go into hyperdrive. And, work, I think when I was in high school and got into college, when I started working, one of the things that, when I got a job, I was just very, very good at my job. It didn't matter what it was, I would kill it. Everybody loved me. I was the most productive person in the world. And then all of a sudden, I just lost
Mm,
interest, didn't care about the job anymore, kept thinking I would, tomorrow will be better. I'll go in tomorrow. It's just like what we're talking about, where you think you can change it, and then tomorrow comes and you're like, okay, Wednesday I'm going to go in there and be back, and it just doesn't happen. And then you end up like, like you saw Anne Hathaway there, you lose
mhm,
jobs. And from my time, from high school until now, I've probably had 45 to 50 jobs.
mhm,
um, so those, but again, I wasn't able to relate it to being mentally ill or bipolar. To me, it just wasn't the right job for me. The next one's better. This is not what it was meant to be.
mhm,
Um, so yeah, so I think that was when I first probably started experiencing it. And then as I got older, I'm not going to say it got worse. I just think the stakes are higher, so it seems worse. So I think
mhm,
it's all relevant. But when I was in high school, I could work a menial job and quit. Who cares? But
mhm.
now I have 3 kids. I work a job and I quit or get fired. A lot more people care.
Sure.
And then that brings up the whole point of, um, I was irresponsible. I was called, I was labeled irresponsible, selfish, didn't want to work, lazy, didn't care about anybody but myself. Um, and it just became who I was. I had to deal with it.
Mhm.
There was no denying it, but
Yeah. Yeah, that stigma and that misunderstanding is it's so hard. I have a friend who lives with bipolar disorder and does a lot of speaking, Gabe Howard, and he makes the comment that having a mental illness is like running a marathon with cement shoes on and nobody can see, and they're asking you, why are you not keeping up? What's wrong with you? There is a lot of that. In addition to whatever your challenges are to begin with, you've got the stigma and the social, people backing away, as we say at NAMI. Mental health conditions are not casserole diseases. If you have cancer, you're kind of surrounded with love and warmth and casseroles.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a different deal, but props to you for taking your difficult experiences and putting it out there to help others. You're getting a lot of good comments in the chat. So when you were a police officer, you spent hours on one occasion talking and listening to a gentleman who was suicidal, and until he changed his mind, you saved his life. Tell us about that day.
Yeah, so this story kind of, when I look back, this is a story that means a lot to me. Other than the fact that we saved the guy's life, which is important as well. But I think this story is one of the driving forces for me wanting to speak and continue going and taking this further and further. So we're on duty one night. It was I think it was a Sunday night. It was like 11 p.m. It was cold. There was some snow on the ground that was left over, and we get a call on the radio that she doesn't put it over the radio. She tells us to call her on our cell phones. So usually when that comes, you're kind of like, okay, something's, something that this is probably going to be something not good. They don't want to put it over the radio.
This
So
was in New Jersey?
Yeah, Southern New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So we call in, and basically the dispatcher says there's a suicidal subject who just left the residence, gives the area of the residence. He's armed with a knife, has 2 teenage daughters that are out looking for him.
Oh.
So that creates, from a law enforcement perspective, that creates a whole different scenario. A, you don't want them to see if something happened, and B, more importantly, you don't know if he's going to take them out with him. You don't know what his state of mind is. So, the sense of urgency came where, we need to find him before they do.
Right.
So, I start searching, some buildings. Behind the buildings are some woods, and I find his car, door open, engine running. I call out, I see the vehicle. I don't see the, so I go out. So I find him, and he's basically in the woods, sitting in the snow or standing in the snow, and he had blood, coming from both wrists. So you can see, it was a cry for help, but I think, because if he really wanted to do it, he would have done it. But I still think he was, he was gonna, he was there. He was close. It wasn't like he had some good gashes.
Wow.
So, him and we started talking, and I didn't go in, drop the knife. It was just, what's going on, and he started, we had a conversation, and then I learned, I knew he had 2 daughters. So I said, yeah, I got 3 teenagers, not teenagers at the time. I said, I have 3 daughters. I said, so whatever you're going through, man, I got 1 more than you do, and he kind of, you could tell he was lightening up. And I said, look, but so then what happened was you heard the sirens coming, because everybody's coming, and I can see he tensed back up. So I get on the radio, and I told everybody, I'm like, nobody come in here. We're safe, lights off, do not come in. And my sergeant says, are you sure you're okay? I said, yes. So he says, okay. So anyway, long story short, we talked, and we probably sat there for a good 25, 30 minutes. And
Mm,
prior to that, though, he did allow me to come and wrap his wrist. I said, look, we can talk more, but I'm not going to have you bleed out in front of me, you know. And he's like, are you going to arrest? I said, no, you know. So we went up, wrapped his wrist, and we talked. And it was the holidays. And, you know, he had just lost his job, um,
uh,
you know, and he just was having a hard time. So, you know, finally I said, you know, we'll get you some help. Don't worry, you know, your daughters, I mean, imagine, you think your daughters need, you know, want money? You know, they want their dad. So he allowed us to take them to the hospital, but only if I would, you know, if I went with him.
mm,
So this whole story is about, it's about perception.
mhm,
Because at the time I remember, you know, that stayed with me for a long time. But the part I couldn't shake, no matter how much I tried, was thinking, like, why he's selfish. You know,
mm,
like who's going to do that to their kids? And as much as I didn't want to think that, I couldn't stop myself from thinking that.
mm,
So, and you know, and again, it's perception. That's my perception. But you know, then when I went through what I went through, one of the first things I did when I came out of it was I thought of that story, and I said, "How dare me?" You know, I was just like, "Shame on me." You know,
well,
but
we don't know what we don't know.
right, and then again, so that's one of the driving forces. You know, is people need to understand that, you know, mental health awareness is great, but you know, we're aware. Awareness really is not a strong word. Uh,
Mhm.
I mean, are you aware that there's a space program? You're aware of it, right?
Yeah. Don't
Okay,
ask
well,
me anything
so
about it, but
what
yes.
happens? Yeah, if a jet propulsion system starts to fail on launch, what are we going to do? I don't know.
Yeah,
You know, so we're aware of a lot of things. Um, you know, but we need to have base. It should be like mental health basic education or mental health perception. You know, we need to be able to perceive something is wrong, and we need to
right.
know what the tools are, you know, or the resources are. And that's kind of where I feel, um, you know, if I had known that back then,
Mm,
you know, you know, it didn't make a difference in that case, but maybe, you know, maybe it was a different, you know, could have been a different outcome. You know,
absolutely.
what if I was the cop next, you know, came in going, you know, put the gun up, you know, drop the knife, you're being selfish, you know, who
Right.
knows how that could have ended. So,
Yeah. Well, I definitely hear what you're saying as far as that huge knowledge gap that you're stepping into. And I really want to emphasize you did a model job of working with that man. We at NAMI were very involved with a program called the Crisis Intervention Team, in which law enforcement officers are trained to do precisely what you did, that you're engaging, you're talking and de-escalating and listening to the emotions of the person's story. When you take that command and control approach and drop your weapon, if you don't comply, I'm going to force you to comply physically. That's how people get hurt, because that
yeah,
doesn't work with mental illness.
yeah,
Yeah. So thank you for handling that so well. And it's just a wonderful example. And it's encouraging to know that that is happening.
no, thank you. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, it was a happy ending.
Yeah, we all need those in life. So, as you alluded to just now, you've also had your own thoughts and near misses with suicide. So what was your experience then?
So, you know, as I got older, and you know, like I was saying before, the stakes get higher. And
Right.
one thing about me when I was manic, you know, I can only speak for me, and I know that, you know, my depressive episodes got a lot worse because the stakes of what I was losing became much higher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when I was manic, and I'm not to toot my horn or anything, but I'm very, very smart at and good at starting something that I feel there's a need for, and
Mm-hmm.
I can get very successful very quick. You know, when I get manic and I get an idea, I run with it and I don't stop. And I make it work. I got
Mhm.
some of the examples. We published the children's book during one of my manic episodes and actually got honorable mention at the New York City Book Festival.
Wow.
And yeah, and nobody told me that we could get it on the shelves of Barnes and Noble. And I got it on the shelves at Barnes and Noble because nobody told me I could.
Exciting.
I
Well
started
done.
a nutrition store another time I was manic, and it became, super popular. Published a magazine that started as in my nutrition store. We just started it as a 2-page newsletter. And then my mania set in. I'm like, nah, let's do a 4-page color. And then it was, let's do 16-page color. And then it was, next thing you know, we're up to a 48-page full color magazine that
Wow.
we sold out advertising in the first month. So the reason I'm mentioning all these is because then when the depressive, it's a lot more to lose. So when the stakes are higher and, I put a lot more into it, including all of my assets, it's very irresponsible, because I don't have that long game plan. I don't know that, I wasn't in the position to say, okay, I know that in a year, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore with you guys. And if I could say that, we could have planned for it. So as more time went on, it gets just all of you're kind of taking the resources from one and you have to live off of them while you're depressed. And then when it starts again, you're looking for more resources. So towards the end, it got to where, I was having my cars repossessed.
Ouch.
I was homeless. I used to play I call it the gas pump slot machine game. I never looked at my bank account because I didn't want to know. So when I went to fill up my car, when I had a car, I would just pray it didn't stop when you run out of money.
Oh, no.
It's kind of like pull the wheel and I'm like, okay, $4, baby, keep going.
Oh, wow.
But I think so as that just gets worse and worse and my kids get older and older, it just got harder to rebound. And even though I knew I could, I just didn't want to anymore. And I saw as my kids,
Exhausting.
it is exhausting. And as my kids got older, I really alienated them because I think another strong thing of bipolar is narcissistic behavior. Somebody would tell me, I was always right. Don't tell me what to do. And as my kids got older, they got really alienated. So there was a point where I didn't even have them. So it was, so yeah. So there's a couple times where it was close, but I never had the nerve until November 18th of 2018. That was probably the day that I would have done it.
Wow.
Yeah.
But the universe had a plan for you, or something happened.
100 dimes. It's literally 100 dimes saved my life. But 100 dimes and a friend.
Okay.
So yeah, but what had happened was I had come out of a meeting, so I was in my depressive state, and this is when I had nothing. The car was gone. I was done. There was no more resources. I had burned every bridge I had, and I remember prior to this happening, I never gave up. So I was sending out resumes. I'm like, I can fix this. And it's just nothing was sticking. And I got an interview with the company. I did a phone interview. I remember I struggled through it. I'm just like, I just don't, it's almost like I didn't even do it, but I'll do it. And a few days before November 18th, they called and said that the vice president is flying into Raleigh and they want to interview me along with a bunch of other candidates that day. I said, okay, great. So I'm not even going to get into the story of how I ended up getting a car, but so I had a car to use. It was like 3 miles to the gallon. And I was in an
Was it a
apartment that,
scout?
yeah, I was in an apartment that I was about to get evicted out of. Um,
Ooh.
and the day of the interview was, I remember I had no relationship with my mother. I had burned that bridge. And I remember I said, I just need to go to this interview. And I called my mom and I said, look, I'm going to go to this interview. And having had no relationship with her for about a year, she Venmoed me like $200. And I'm like, okay.
Aw.
So from my apartment to the gas station was about a mile and a half. So I have the money in my account. I check it. It's there. I go to the gas station, put the card in, doesn't work. I
Uh-oh.
checked my account. I had owed money and it was the second it went in, they took it out.
Oh, no.
So I had zero gas. And this interview was about 20 miles away and
Ooh.
30 minutes away. And I'm standing at the gas station wearing a suit. And I lost it. That was it. I drove home and I was done. And I went in my bedroom and my one daughter was in my living room. And all I had was a beanbag. I didn't even have furniture. I'd sold all my furniture off, which I did every cycle.
Oh,
And
God.
I went in the closet, lost it. And I said, that's it. I was done. I had no choice. There was just no reason for me. There was no way out of it. And as I was sitting in the closet, thinking about facilitating this, I look over and there's a bag, like a little paper bag, that you get from like carry out, that was in the corner of my closet. And I'm just like, something made me look in it. And I dump it out. It was a bunch of change.
Oh, wow.
And there was 100 dimes in there. I counted out 100 dimes. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is a sign. So I decided to walk out of the closet. And I took the 100 dimes and I went back to the gas station. And I stood in line. And I'm in a suit and I get up there and I remember I'm like, this is so embarrassing, but whatever. I pull out 100 dimes and I put them on the counter. And I remember the lady looks at me and I was not in the mood. And I said something to her, just, it probably wasn't very nice, but I'm like, 100 dimes worth on that pump, and just whatever. So I went out. So to make a long story short, I end up going to the interview. I end up getting this job. But I got the job, it was a long process. That was November. I got hired in January to start in February. In the meantime, after my interview, probably a day or two later, I get a knock at the door. And it's a friend of mine, Michelle, who's a therapist. We've been very good friends for a long time, which is, and she's at my door and or calls me, however it was. And we ended up seeing each other. And she said to me, she goes, I haven't said anything to you for years, because I'm just, we're friends, I'm watching. She goes, but you're in trouble. And I remember, I'm like, what do you mean? And she goes, you're not depressed, you're bipolar and you're in trouble. And I said, what do you mean I'm in trouble? And she said, you're going to go get help or I'm going to call an ambulance and we're going to force you. And I remember looking at her like, how dare you, like, who are you? So I said, fine, you're not calling an ambulance. So she took me, or I went over to Wake County. And that was it. That was the change. That was the pivot. And I remember, I spent, they didn't admit me, but I went back. It was like 3 days in a row. And I went all day and, met with therapists and psychiatrists. And I'll never forget the psychiatrist when I sat down, during this whole process, which was an amazing process. And I'm thinking, this is a county, this is going to be such a crock of BS. But the process was amazing. And when I sat down with the actual psychiatrist, I'll never forget, he said, so what do you think you are? And I said, well, I'm depression all my life. And he goes, you don't think you're bipolar? And I said, no, I'm depression and probably ADHD. And he goes,
Mm.
so he says, well, no, you're bipolar. And whatever, he's like, you're bipolar, dude. That's what he said. And I'm like, and he starts asking me questions, how many jobs have you had? And he's just literally asking me these questions. And he says, what's the longest you held a job? And I told him like 13 years. And he goes, let me guess. Police officer, firefighter, emergency room,
Wow.
something. And I remember looking at him going, all right, you're freaking me out.
Huh.
I mean, he nailed it. And, explained because those are the jobs that people with bipolar can stay with, because it's the ups and downs are part of the job.
Wow.
And he goes, bipolar people thrive in the military, they thrive in, police, action packed. So, yeah, so it started there, the proper medication, just treatment. And then I started researching it and studying it on my own. And that was December. That happened in the end of November in 2018. I started that job in February. My mother helped me, gave me a deposit for a new car, or car, because that job was a lot of travel. Within, I think, 4 months, I paid her back fully, which I've never done before, and I'm still with that company today. And
Wow.
yeah, and I've made more money in the last couple of years than I ever have, and my retirement accounts are back up, and so it's
Congratulations.
100 dimes, and somebody who
100.
knew the signs.
That is amazing.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, I'm so thrilled for your success and the fact that you've managed to find recovery and keep things flowing in such a positive way. It sounds like you've restored your relationships. I really want to thank you, Ryan, for your courage, because so many people with mental health conditions do hit kind of a rock bottom. There's a huge overlap with homelessness, with joblessness, with burned bridges socially, emotionally. So it really lets people know that there's hope, that they're not alone, that there is a road to recovery when people like you step forward and talk about what you've been through. So I want to really thank you for that. You're a great storyteller. The time has flown by. I want to be sure we get to people's questions and wrap up the video or the interview portion of the show. Before we go to our video of the week, a big shout out to our volunteers working behind the scenes. We have an MSW student, Caitlin Rita, our intern who does a great job, and our fabulous executive director, Gary Kreitz, PhD. And of course, we're so grateful to our guest, Ryan, for being here with us for the evening. We usually do something light for our video of the week. We're going to go ahead and share a fun little video of Roxy Morrison, one of our former mascots for Nami, North Carolina. Roxy is a Beagle American, and she's having a lot of fun in this video. I hope you enjoy it. All right. Aw, that was Roxy. Adorable. All right. We've got quite a few questions in the Q&A, so we'll jump right into that. This is an interesting one. What does exercise do for bipolar disorder?
Yeah, good, good question. Um, Exercise is probably one of the best things for it. And
Hmm.
the hard part, though, especially where I'm struggling, is getting to the gym.
Sure.
I know it's good for me, and even though I am medicated, and you know, it's still a struggle sometimes. But yeah,
Mhm.
you have to force yourself to go. I'm in the process right now of trying to force myself to go back because I keep going. But when I go, I feel amazing.
Right. I always have dogs and that helps me. It forces me to get out. So at least I'm walking a lot. I know what you mean. It's hard to build that structure in so that you do things, even though you know they're great for you, like exercise, meditation. It's just hard to push yourself and get that rhythm started. Um, Question from Kent. Could you discuss your bipolar experience in law enforcement? I kind of feel like you did that, but maybe you have something to add.
Um, Again, I didn't know that I was bipolar. So, but I think the reason that I thrived at it was because what was nice about law enforcement, and I don't want to sound, but if you didn't want to work and be proactive, you really didn't have to. So when I was in those manic times or just felt depressed or whatever, I just would kind of lay low and just respond to calls as opposed to being proactive. But when I was in those manic states, I mean, I would kick butt. I mean, I have some incredible armed robbery arrests that I made when I was just so hyper focused.
Hmm.
But but yeah, I think it's conducive, but also it's just like just that you never know what's going to come. It's the adrenaline's always pumping. So sometimes I think that the adrenaline also kind of compensates for the lack of dopamine and things that bring you down. When you get that hyper adrenaline, it
Hmm.
brings you up. So I mean, I hope that
Yeah,
answered the question. I'm not sure.
I think so. I've heard people refer to a godlike mania. It seems like that's a feeling that is somewhat common. And you were in law enforcement for over 13 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a good chunk of your career. Um, Comment, you must have been a strong interviewer since your large number of past jobs didn't deter later employers from hiring you.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I'm a strong interviewer, and I'm also a very good, I can word things in a interesting way.
Ah, you're good at framing things and
Yeah,
crafting a
I mean,
message.
I didn't lie. A lot
Right.
of the jobs that I had, I did a lot of jobs where I worked for myself, or I would work for a company, but I always would go in as a consultant. Um, so that way I can say, as opposed to having a job, I've had a lot of clients as a consultant, which is
Hmm,
true.
that's fair. Okay.
But I'm also a good
Um,
interviewer.
I can understand that. I definitely get that. Um, Here's a lovely message from Haley. It takes a certain level of bravery to go into law enforcement, but the courage that you have demonstrated tonight is mind blowing. You are such an inspiration, and I just want to thank you for sharing your story. You may have left the force, but you are still saving lives.
Oh, thank you. I
Nice.
appreciate that. Sweet.
Um, okay. Question from Gary. You said that law enforcement officers often have bipolar disorder. Does being bipolar ever pose a danger for the officers?
Yeah, okay, first, Leah, let me just correct that. If I came off like that, I didn't say they often have bipolar disorder. Um, a lot of people that have bipolar disorder thrive in the law enforcement career. So,
I think
I
that
don't
is how
know,
you said it.
but could it pose? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It definitely could. Um, especially in today's day and age, not that I see, I'll preface this with, I was a very, very fair, and I was a very good police officer. In
Mhm.
13 years, I've never had one complaint about me. Um,
Wow.
and I've actually, I usually, my goal was to leave every arrest with a handshake, didn't matter how bad it was. Um, I've,
Wow.
I've arrested gang members where when we're done, I shake hands. I said, you're playing your game, I'm playing mine. I'll see you again. And it was always like, okay, you're cool. But with that said, you know, we didn't, the cameras weren't as prevalent as they are today back then.
Mhm.
So that's where the bipolar people and other people with attitudes, as you see, can get in trouble. But yeah, I mean, bipolar, if you're on a manic, you can get triggered very easily. So
Sure.
it's probably not something that you want to get caught on camera doing.
Right. And I'm going to suggest that anytime you have a health condition that is untreated, you could put people in danger, whether it's
Yeah.
diabetes or epilepsy or bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
Um, so sure. What is your current career?
So I work for a company that is a manufacturer of um, wood moldings, and I cover all of North Carolina. So basically, I'm a manufacturer's rep. So
Okay.
uh, I do well because I don't like to be managed, um, and I have a lot of freedom, and I cover the entire state or the whole eastern side of North Carolina, and I visit. It's basically the same clients, and I just wine and dine them. That's about it. So it's
Okay.
nice to travel and take people out to lunch and dinner all the time.
Oh, that sounds fun. So wood moldings, not a huge do-it-yourselfer. Those are the wood pieces that make the edges of the room look pretty.
Yeah, yeah. Any kind of moldings or one by boards. Like you got the
Okay.
craftsman look with the one by boards now. And
Okay.
if you go into Home Depots and you look in their molding section, our company manufactures all of the Home Depot moldings. So
All right. All right. And I know my partner probably rolled her eyes when I asked that question, but someone else out there doesn't know it. So now we all know. Um, so what helped you even out the bipolar disorder?
specifically, like the medications.
Uh, well, like, was it medication and lifestyle change, counseling and medication?
Yeah, I mean, medication was top of the list.
Mm,
Because like I said, the psychiatrist that I met with that shocked me when he said the law enforcement.
yeah.
He put me on some medication, and I mean, this guy was so sharp, and he
Mm,
he, he told me by day 3 you're going to feel this, by day 4, and it was just incredible how literally just on day 3 you woke up, and I'm thinking, okay, like I don't feel like crying every minute, but a little, it just so
mm,
medication is pivotal. And I'm still working on the rest.
sure.
I think it is a lifestyle change that, yes, my girlfriend who's on this call, she's been, yeah, she's telling me forever to get on it. But, I have a Peloton, and when I got the Peloton, I remember first thing she said is, it's going to be one of the most expensive clothes hangers. And yeah, it is. But when I do ride it, I love it. So
Well,
yeah,
it
life,
takes,
I think it's everything. I think it's lifestyle, diet,
yeah.
exercise. Um, Meditation is something that I'm starting to get into,
Hmm.
and that's really helped me sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that. I relate to the medication that for me, it was depression and anxiety. And I had tried everything, exercise, St. John's Wort, I joined Toastmasters, all those things. And I needed medication for that. And I think sometimes it takes a while to warm up and develop a friendship. So I think you and your Peloton are going to be right there at some
We're
point.
we'll get there. It's a date.
You're
We're
building
dating.
trust.
Yeah, that's all right.
This is a good question. How should a loved one support someone with bipolar disorder?
I don't know. I don't know if Michelle, you're on the phone. I don't know if you want to take that one. She's probably gonna get mad for. Um, I don't, I don't know the answer to that, because I would think that every person, I think you have to first of all be capable of supporting somebody with bipolar disorder. I don't think that everybody, is capable of doing that, and I think trying to force it is just detrimental to a relationship or a family member. But understanding is number one. You just have to have somebody who's willing. It's kind of like, when you're living with an alcoholic, they have, the spouse or the partner, the family member can go, to another group and learn. You really have to want to learn it.
Hmm.
But yeah, we struggle with that. We're struggling with that now, my girlfriend and I. Yeah.
Sure.
My mood swings are sometimes too much, and she just wants me to communicate it, and sometimes I can't. And it goes back to that thing. It's so funny because when I'm good, I'll say to her, okay, next time when I'm feeling this way, I'm just going to tell you I'm feeling that. And she's like, that's all I want. But then I'm sitting there and I'm feeling it, and I just can't say the words, and I'm sitting
Yeah.
there looking at her, and it's in my head, just tell her. But you just can't. And it's just so frustrating. And it's like, I know she'll never understand that. And then later on, it's like,
Yeah.
why didn't you just tell me? Just, I can't. But
Yeah. Well, sometimes, I mean, if I put myself in your shoes, I can relate to that. Sometimes I'm in that confident space where I could just say, this is how I'm feeling. And if I'm depressed, I'm in a vulnerable space, then saying I'm feeling down, I'm feeling sick, then I feel naked and exposed and like I can't live with that feeling. So
yeah,
it is hard. It's a hard thing to learn. Um, and this is a good time for me to mention that NAMI has an awesome family to family class. It's an 8-week course, and you meet virtually or in person with other folks who have a loved one with some kind of mental health condition. You learn about the different diagnoses, what they look like, um, how do we take care of ourselves, and how do we communicate better. So family to family. And on our side, we've got the peer-to-peer class, also 8 weeks, and kind of similar. What are the diagnoses? How do we take care of ourselves, and how can we plan and communicate better? Okay, question from April. What would you advise someone who is still struggling with bipolar disorder?
well, it's a never-ending cycle, or it's a never-ending battle. And I think that's the mistake that I've made and other people make, is they think they've got it nipped. You're never going to have it nipped. If you're still struggling, my advice, and I wrote an article about this. I wrote a little article called, basically like finding help for bipolar, finding the right resources is like online dating. And if you're still struggling, I don't know, what resources you're doing or what you're trying to do to fix it. For me, if it's not, whatever you're doing, if it's not working, trust your body, trust your mind, and move on. It's like dating. If I go to a therapist, usually within 5 minutes I can tell if I'm coming back.
Right.
And there's some, medication. I've been with the medication person for many years who I love, but I still every once in a while will make an appointment with somebody different. And people say,
Mhm.
why? Because I don't know. Why not? If I don't know how, you don't know when you feel great because you have nothing to compare it to. So there's
Mhm.
times where, I'll go on and go to another doctor, and sometimes they'll mix it up, and then I'll realize like, oh my gosh, okay, she's horrible. I'll go back to mine. But so yeah, the answer is it's a cocktail, and you have to just continually mix that cocktail of, drugs, therapists, psychiatrists, lifestyle changes. I mean, literally, you just have to keep mixing it until you find it, because it's out there,
Yeah.
but it's different for everybody.
Mm-hmm. I got to say, that was very well said. I've been doing NAMI support groups for years, and you kind of synthesized what everybody says, that it's an individual thing in the brain, the body. There's so many different factors that impact our mental health. It's your hormones, your blood sugar, your brain, your chemistry. And half the medications that are helpful, they don't really know why they're helpful. They just noticed a correlation. So yeah, it's a tough thing.
And do your own research. I've had doctors where that I've gone into, and they've recommended I try this drug, and I said, no, I don't want that drug. And they're, and I've, well, what do you mean you don't want it? I'm the doctor. I said, I've read about it. I don't think it's going to be good for me. So take control of your body. If do your own research. You can say no. Just because somebody's a doctor doesn't mean anything.
They will give you that look, though.
You know what? I've gotten it, and if the doctor doesn't appreciate that, then it's time to get another doctor.
Right. Yeah, you can tell many of them are not used to being challenged.
Yeah.
So
it's my body. It's not yours.
That's right. That's right. You got to advocate for yourself.
Yeah. I mean,
All
how would
right.
they feel if I told them that, well, I think you should take this.
Right.
I'm not a doctor, but yeah, it's still.
Yeah, go ahead and drink this wild turkey all at once. Have the bottle.
Yeah, I can do it. No, I can't. I don't drink. That's another thing. Stop drinking if you drink.
Yeah,
that
with
was a big thing
medication.
too.
Sure. Interesting question. Is diet important for your mental health, and is it more important with bipolar disorder?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because again, you're dealing with chemicals. I am more of a knowledge person on this than an actual. I don't follow my own advice, but yeah, but the knowledge is yes, because foods lead to chemical reactions in your body. So, I don't want to spike. I always want to keep as level as I can. So sugars, even though I drink them, I shouldn't. Like this. Probably the Monster is probably the worst thing I could drink, because again, I'm spiking. I'm getting the sugar energy, then I'm getting the depletion. So yeah, it definitely is. Stay away from simple carbs, because simple carbs are basically just sugar. So but yeah, anything that produces a chemical reaction in your body should be monitored, whether it's food, medication, vitamins, anything.
That's the advice that I give people too.
Well, good. I feel validated.
I don't take it necessarily. So, but yeah, studies have shown what you're saying, that processed foods, high sugar foods are really not great for your mental health. But gosh, they're really satisfying.
I know.
All right. We've got a lull in the questions. We do have a few more minutes. We can go as late as 8:30. We kind of go with the flow and the energy of the group. I'm so glad you all are here for us with this conversation. I've learned so much tonight. A couple quick announcements. When you leave the Zoom meeting, you'll see a survey pop up. Please take a couple quick minutes to fill out that survey. It helps us improve over time and show our funders the value of what we do. Join us next week. We're going to have another interesting conversation about bipolar disorder. These are always popular speakers. Fatine Abdel Sabur is going to tell us about her life with bipolar disorder. She's experienced hospitalizations and recovery. She's a freelance writer and an educator, and has so many interesting stories to tell, just like Ryan, but different stories, not the same, not just like. So yeah, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Um, no, I mean, I guess I would leave it with, just remember, keep in mind the word perception. I mean, that's my big word. And I'll leave it with this question. Ask yourself, what is our perception of normal? The word normal. If you see somebody rambling to themselves or screaming at passerbyers and jumping up and down like a monkey in the middle of the street, you would think, well, that's not normal. So they probably have some kind of mental condition. But if you see somebody who's, I'll say a good-looking guy, but irresponsible, not good with money, gets moody and alienates their friends, you probably still would classify that person as normal, but your perception would be wrong. Would you ever see somebody like that and say, wow, they might have a mental condition? No, you wouldn't. So it's just, keep your mind open. You never know. You never know what somebody's going through. So
I think that's a wonderful takeaway. I'd like to think that over the years of the pandemic, we've learned to give each other grace, and I hope that continues, that we haven't walked in the other person's shoes. So if they seem moody or judgmental, or, why are they not showing up when they said they would be here? Let's try to understand that we don't always get it. We don't know what burden they're carrying. And if you're out there feeling alone, you feel like no one speaks your language, nobody knows what you're going through, please give us a call at NAMI. We'd love to be there for you. We do get it, and we'd love to help. You can call our helpline and reach out on our website. Ryan Mayer, thank you so very much for your courage, for your stories, and all the wisdom that you've shared with us tonight.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. This was my first time speaking about everything. So this is my first platform, hopefully of many, but it was fun.
Get out of here. This is your inaugural
This
presentation.
This is it.
Nice. Wow. See, you heard it here first. The famous
That's
Ryan
right.
Mayer.
That's right.
Yeah. So you did a wonderful job, says
Well, thank
Caitlin,
you.
and I agree. So don't forget the little people when you're like that high-powered speaker.
There is no little people.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night. And we can send you, well, we can send people who attended tonight your website address, because we've got some interest in following you. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
All right. Thank you all.
Take care.